Hello and welcome to another mudlarking adventure. We've gone east again, so we're just outside the historic square mile or city of London, and we're in Wapping. And this road, rather nice, gives you an idea, I suppose, of what the area used to be like when it was in its industrial heyday of docks, warehouses, that sort of thing. So I was delighted the last time I came here. A great amount of 18th century onwards, some nice pottery finds, some exciting Delftware. So we'll see what turns up. Some nice metal finds last time, so let's hope for something nice today. Down to the foreshore here on this ladder. Not great with heights, so this is my scary part of the day. But we made it okay down the ladder, and here we are on the foreshore at Wapping. A huge area to search. I mean, I only searched a tiny fraction of what was available last time. So this time I'm going to head off in this direction and head towards the City of London, hoping that the nearer I get to the actual square mile, the older finds we might have. The tide is just going out at the moment, so it's safe to explore a new area because I can always get back to my safe exit from the foreshore. So if the tide was going in, I wouldn't go where I wasn't sure where I could have a escape off the foreshore. I wouldn't want to get trapped by the incoming tide. It does go out a long way and come in a long way as well. So let's head off in this direction. Beautiful day. So we got acres and acres of exposed London history to search, but we're going to head off in this direction and see what turns up. Very muddy today, which does obviously cut down the amount of finds because some of them are just covered in mud and you don't actually see them. So first plastic bottle of the day. Let's put that in our bag and tidy up the foreshore that way. Some bits of pottery here. There's a little salt glaze stoneware handle. That might be late 17th, early 18th century. And quite a big bit of pot here. I'm going to just see what that is. Well, it's a shallow bowl, post-medieval redware. I don't think it's got any great age to it. There's two very heavy bits of clay here. This yellow fabric, it's got a little cutout there, and then also salt glazed stoneware, which also got a cutout there, and I wonder if they might be Saggers for firing pottery. Also got a rim coming out of the mud here. Yeah. Oh, so that's actually a base rather than a rim. It looks like a sort of Sunderland type slipware, which would be Victorian, late Victorian. Useful wear, one might say. There's quite a lot of bits of the yellow clay, which are probably Saggers, and these stoneware ones. You can see that's got two cutouts to let the heat circulate in the kiln. I'm guessing it's a Sagger. I can't think what else other use it might have. So stoneware production could be any time from the late 17th through to the 19th century. I guess probably later rather than earlier. This really is pottery heaven at the moment. It's just absolutely stuffed full of these yellow, what I guess are Saggar fragments. And other bits of salt glazed stoneware. Very thick industrial looking bits. That's got some nice decoration on it. Very nice. And then this little bit, Sticking out of that, you've got some clay pipe stems. So I'm not sure if that's part of a clay pipe kiln, which they sometimes used to use the broken stems to pack out the kiln sides, or whether it's just some stoneware potter having a laugh after he's finished a smoke and just sticking the pipe stems in there. But that's quite interesting. I'm going to keep that one. Just down here on the water's edge is our first bit of tin glazed earthenware. There, just a little fragment with some blue painted, hand painted decoration. Again, very fragile glaze, chipped at the edges on buff earthenware. Whopping police station here, or floating river station. And just down here, a bit of feather edge earthenware, often blue, so green is quite nice to see. This started to be made at the end of the 18th century, 1780s, 70s, 90s, and was very popular up to about 1820, but obviously continued to be made after that. Some slipware, not such a nicely formed sort of feather pattern, but just very plain stripy one. This was made in London up to the 1830s. It started made in Staffordshire, but also made in Bristol in the 17th century. Very popular for baking dishes, so that's a very recognisable find and very nice looking pottery. Nicer with the sort of feathering on it, the Bakewell tart design, but this is still pleasant enough. This piece demonstrates the Sagger idea. That is a big container for protecting things while you're firing them in the kiln. And as you can see, there's lots of little broken bits, or the bottom of the pots or whatever they were firing there, and runs of glaze on it, and then the cutouts there to let the heat circulate through the kiln. So I'm certain that is kiln waste, which is interesting. We're underneath a jetty here, and there's quite a lot of erosion going on. So lots of various finds being revealed, and just hopefully in the distance you can see London and the Shard there. A pretty handle, salt glazed stoneware, probably going to be early 19th, mid 19th century, from a useful flagon or jug of some sort. Here we have a clay pipe. This is actually quite an old one. The shape, sort of barrel shaped, there is going to be 17th century. So it's nice that we're getting some older material turning up. No maker's mark, sometimes on the heel, that would be very collectible. But I've got so many pipes, I'm just going to leave that one for somebody else to enjoy. This is rather nice. I've just picked this up, and it's got sort of streaky glaze there, brown and green. So I'm hoping this is what they call tortoiseshell, which is a mid-18th century style of glazing on earthenware, but we'll have to check that out when we get home. More tin glaze earthenware here. You can just see the remains of some tin glaze on the outside of that, and just plain white tin glazed inside. There was a fair amount of just plain white Delftware earthenware, tin glazed earthenware made through the 17th and 18th centuries. A lot of it made in London. And the usual suspects, a large chunk of post-medieval redware. Red clay, grey core, so it hasn't been fired to a very high temperature in the kiln. Very, very chunky, large vessel, communal cooking or an industrial process of some sort. Post-medieval redware, notoriously difficult to pin down to a specific date. Any time from the 16th century right through to the 19th century. The grey core is likely to be an earlier indication, that's an earlier date. So this could be a bit of Tudor pottery, 16th century I would guess, from a very large, useful vessel. And what I love to find is some 18th century white salt glazed stoneware, probably from Staffordshire. It's difficult to see when it's wet, but you can just see it's got a slightly roughened surface, like a little sort of orange peel finish, which made it not very good for decorating or transfer printing. So a lot of it is just plain white, but it's beautifully potted, very thin, the base of a dish or a plate, and I absolutely love this stuff, so I've definitely taken that one home. Some more bits of salt glazed stoneware, white, 18th century, part of a handle, which is nice, and again part of the base, and a little bit with blue decoration in stoneware. So this is going to be slightly different, either German import from Westerwald or a Staffordshire imitation of the same, but probably going to be 18th century in date as well. This little bit of tin glazed earthenware, sort of 1650 to 1770, a base, but it's got two lines of blue hand-painted decoration on the outside, and probably more above. So probably going to be from a drug jar or an ointment pot, which just had very simple linear or dot decoration on the outside, for chemists and sometimes for grocers to sell preparations and ointments in. So that's a nice personal link to that bit of London's past. This humble little bit of pot, it's very hard, like stoneware, with a bit of purplish glaze, is actually very significant. It is like the granddaddy of the whole Staffordshire pottery industry, which continues to this day, and as you know, in its heyday was basically exporting all around the world, and was the largest pottery producing area on earth. But this is, they also call it butter potware, because they used to make these in Staffordshire in the 17th century, early 18th century. Potters were farmers as well on the whole, and they'd so have herds of cattle and produce butter, make the pots to put them in and ship them down to London full of butter. So this really sort of cut the teeth of the Staffordshire pottery industry, as well as the more museum friendly slipware dishes, which we all know about. So a very historic, if very mundane looking bit of pottery there. Midlands purple. I'm halfway into this little cave really, which is weathering away in the foreshore. I should have photographed it or started to video it before I turned it over, because I had a look at this rim, and when I turned it over, what a beautiful bit of slipware. So this is going to date from about 1630 to 1720, likely to be metropolitan slipware made in Harlow in Essex, but could equally be Borderware slipware from the Surrey, Hampshire borders, which is less common but was also sold to London in this time, but I'm very happy with that. That's a lovely bit of pottery to pick up near the police station. A very large and very industrial looking bit of pottery. Again, not very old, probably Victorian. Well, I say not very old, that could be 150 years old. It's got a very interesting hand formed sort of rim there, obviously as a non-slip thing. When you're lifting a huge vat of acid or something off an industrial process, that would help not drop it, obviously. So interesting bit of industrial heritage from London. Here's a fine fellow, a lump of clay. It's probably part of a Spanish oil jar. Olive oil, other liquids, imported 16th century, 17th century, early 18th century. They do look a lot older. They're made in the same areas that produced amphorae in Roman times, and from the same clay, effectively. But although they look very old, they're actually, well, they are old, but they're not Roman. They're Spanish oil jars, and likely to be 16th to 18th century. But it's an interesting import from the Mediterranean. So a lovely view, Tower Bridge, the Shard, as we're just walking towards central London, trying not to get distracted by so many finds of pottery. There's another great big dump of Saggar and Kiln material, possibly from Delftware production, the yellow clay there. But it's a bit of a mystery because we're a long way from the nearest tin glazed earthenware pottery. But here's a nice bit, a Sagger, and it's actually got a little bit of biscuitware delft. So that is the first firing before the glazing stuck to it, and you can see the oval thing there where they let the heat circulate, and some drips of glaze. The lovely base of a glass wine bottle with the kick. Beautiful iridescence that comes from being several hundred years buried or immersed in water. This one shows the slipware feathering much better. So probably part of a baking dish. Any time up to 1830, but could even be late 17th century at the other end of the scale. So always a nice find. Another nice bit of tin glazed earthenware, Delft, 1650s, 1770 generally. Very plain when I spotted it on the mud, but turn it over and you've got some lovely banded decoration from an ointment pot or a storage vessel. So I'm happy with that. I'm not going to go much further into London. Nice view of Tower Bridge there. It's very muddy and you don't know how deep the mud might be, and you don't want to get trapped there. So I'm probably going to turn back and come back the way I went. It is good to see a couple of ladders here as well, so if you were trapped by the tide coming in and cutting off your escape, you could always come back here and make a safe exit off the foreshore. Even here it's a bit squelchy and oozy, a bit oozy mud, one to watch out for. Another bit of white salt glazed stoneware, 18th century. This was produced from about 1710 up to the 1780s. Very popular 1740s, 1760s, thereabouts, before refined earthenware took over. The base, very nicely formed. See if I can find out what sort of vessel that came from. A larger rim of transfer printed earthenware. Transfer printing started in the 1760s, but became very common from the 1780s all through the Victorian period and beyond. So again, difficult to date. Its heyday probably was up to about 1840 in blue transfer printing. So I guess this is probably late Georgian, early Victorian, that type of age. picked up this little round object. It's not a coin, sadly. It's actually made of lead. It's really heavy. I can't see any markings on it at the moment to be a token. So I guess it's probably an impromptu weight that was used by a merchant. If I weigh it at home, I might be able to work out what fraction of a pound it might be. No idea of date on that, of course. This mysterious item of pottery, I just washed it off in the river to try and get a better look at it, but it seems to have some sort of tin glaze, and yet it's on very red clay and there's a hole pierced in it, and it's an odd irregular shape, so one that needs more research. By all means, I'm learning every day when I come down to the river. This is such a pretty glaze. It's like a swirled effect on the clay. Again, probably 18th century, maybe Staffordshire, but just, you know, a humble everyday piece, useful pottery, not fine tableware, and yet they've gone to the trouble of making a swirly pattern or joggled pattern in the glaze there in the slip. Lovely. Part of a mark on a Victorian stoneware flagon. It says MA and W department. I don't know, it might not be possible to research that. There's not much. We'll see what we can do. One of today's best finds is this. It is a lovely part of the rim of a lovely plate in white salt glazed stoneware from the 18th century with a barleycorn pattern, I think that's called. So that's very nice, fine tableware, 1740s, 1760s, to grace the tables of the London well-to-do. Another bad day for a workman. Someone's spoke shave there, that's a carpentry tool. I think we have a coin. Oops. Yes, it is 2p, probably from the late 20th century, 1979. There we are, well at least I can spend that one. Now I have to say, this is the coolest ever. So this is someone's garden and they've got their private slipway and little ladder down to the foreshore. Just see their barbecue there underneath the cover. So I want one, a riverside property with your own slipway down to the Thames foreshore. What could be better? Drain pipe with the flange for fitting the next pipe along in the sequence. A lot of them made by Dalton. Millions of miles of drain pipe made from Victorian times onwards. We're doing okay for slipware today. That's a nice example. We've got a feathered section and a straight section on the same shard, which is very pretty, and the complete vessel would have been an absolute joy to behold. Small base from a saucer or small plate, transfer printed, ladies with hoop skirts, so it'll be Victorian in date, I would think. What a lovely little shard, just hiding here among the bricks, hand painted. Oh, that's nice. So it's a rim, probably a tea bowl or a slop bowl, something like that, with a chinoiserie style, Chinese style, underglazed blue painting, probably sort of 1780 to 1820, so a nice Georgian bit, and possibly, because there's some detail on it, it might be possible to find a parallel for that somewhere online or in one of my books, my many books. A bit of hand-painted porcelain, probably hard glaze, so Chinese import I would guess, 18th century. Porcelain obviously translucent and chips a bit like glass. It's very vitrified clay, fired at a much higher temperature than earthenware. Some more blue and white. Do you like a bit of blue and white? Sunderland type slipware, very creamy thick glaze on red clay, Victorian probably. Very thick old earthenware, not quite sure what. Starting to come in now, so I'll be heading back to the steps and then I can get out safely. More plastic. Bit of erosion underneath this concrete slipway here. Might produce something interesting, you don't know. Mentioned something here. Very abraded glaze, post-medieval redware, very difficult to date. A pipe, stoneware bottle base, a very small bottle rim, definitely smaller than a wine bottle. Glass bottle. Some more blue and white, transfer printed, Georgian Victorian. Always fun to turn them over and see a splash of colour. Just nestling in here is, I think, a bit of Festival stoneware, probably from a large stoneware jug, German stoneware imports, very common late 17th, early 18th century. Here's another little Thames treasure, the base of a pot or teapot with a lovely bit of decoration, a leaf decoration, again to be late 18th, early 19th century I would guess. This is an interesting piece. It's very abraded and it's obviously been in the river for a long time. It's near the rim of a post-medieval redware pot, large vessel, and they have these spumming marks all around the rim, partly for decoration and partly as a practical thing to help lift it off the fire when it's full of lovely food, stew. So this is going to be a bit earlier, it's going to be 16th or 17th century. They made this in Woolwich and other places in London. A bit of a mystery piece of stoneware, a bit odd. If it's a handle, it's rather asymmetric, but it doesn't seem to be a rim, which I thought it was, because it's very smooth and finished on both sides. So, again, one of the mysteries of today. Here's a nice bit, press moulded, maybe part of a jug or a teapot, something decorative. Some nice press moulding and a mottled brown glaze. Not sure if this is 18th century, more likely to be 19th century Victorian. Let's see if we can find a parallel somewhere. Another older piece, very water-worn as usual with older pieces from this part of the foreshore. It's the little foot of a pipkin, so a free-footed vessel that will sit in the fire for cooking. Post a picture of the complete one, you can see the shape. Yellowish glaze, or clear glaze that fires yellow. Probably Surrey, Hampshire Borderware, 1550 to 1700, so a little bit earlier than the other stuff I've been finding, but consequently rather abraded by the action of the water over the last 400 years. A massive bit of something, would have had a lid, blue glazed inside, brown glazed outside. Victorian, I guess. Blue inside, you know, must be late Victorian, they wouldn't have done that earlier, I would have thought. So nice, a little bit of mocha, often blue and yellow. You can just see the dendritic decoration that comes from putting a special solution onto the glaze, and it spreads out into trees and seaweed and other such things. So that's going to be mid to late Victorian. This is most of the base of a Victorian stoneware pot made for blacking stoves and ironwork to make it black. And it is very thickly potted, so sometimes they will survive complete. It's not much taller than that and sort of conical in shape. I'll show you a complete one in a photo. So it's farewell from wonderful Wapping, and see you on the next adventure. Bye!